Our scriptures this morning remind us of something that we don't like to be reminded of sometimes, and that is that we must wait at times. We're not always good at waiting. We don't like to wait. To be stuck in Los Angeles area traffic is a special kind of torture, as we know. To wait in a 2.5-hour line for one ride at Disney makes me want to weep and gnash my teeth and run screaming. We're also conditioned not to wait because we text each other now. You may have noticed that people now expect responses immediately to their texts and to their messages. No more voicemail, no more half an hour or hour of waiting. No, we want to be responded to right now. We are conditioned to be more and more impatient, and yet so often life entails waiting. And in our scriptures today, we read about waiting and yearning for God, which can sometimes seem to take forever. We read about Habakkuk, this prophet who speaks hope to his people, even when they are in exile, even when they have been defeated. Around the year 586 BC, they were defeated by the Babylonians, cast into exile in Babylon, and right during that time, Habakkuk wrote this book, wrote these words to the people of Israel. The Israelites heard Habakkuk say, "Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it." In other words, use big font so that if a runner runs by these stone tablets, even running, the reader will be able to read what it says. Make the vision plain, for there still is a vision for the appointed time. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Even in this time of devastation, when their people had been defeated and sent into exile, they were meant to look for God's vision, to expect it to come. So let's put it in bold print. Let's put it in large font, says God to Habakkuk, so that everyone can read it. And in a similar way, Zacchaeus gets into a tree to wait for Jesus' coming. He is going to wait expectantly. He has every reason to believe that he will never be satisfied in his life because he's a tax collector. He's been defrauding his neighbors. He's been cheating his fellow Jewish people, collecting taxes for the Romans and taking a large cut for himself. He almost admits to committing fraud in this passage, and he commits to repay those whom he has defrauded. And yet Zacchaeus too, even though he has no reason to think people will love him, believes that Jesus might. And so he climbs into a sycamore tree because he was short and couldn't see anyone without doing that. And so he got into the tree. Perhaps Jesus wouldn't have seen him either if he hadn't climbed into that tree. And Zacchaeus climbs into a sycamore tree. I believe these are sycamore branches that we have on the image on your bulletin and on the screen this morning. And with this view, Zacchaeus looked down and waited for Jesus longingly, expectantly, until Jesus said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." Do you know the song? Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm coming to your house today, for I'm coming to your house today. Jesus shocked Zacchaeus and all of the crowd by calling him out and saying, "I will eat with you at your home today. We have an appointment, don't you remember? I'm accepting you fully just as you are." And Zacchaeus' heart is changed, and he commits to repaying those whom he's defrauded and to giving half of his possessions to the poor. And his household is saved by God's grace. We're invited, like Zacchaeus or Habakkuk, to wait for God to appear, even though we don't know what we're waiting for. What a vital message this is. Sometimes we don't see signs of hope in our world or in our nation, in the mainline church, which seems to be declining. We are concerned that there's no vision, but we're not the first ones who had trouble seeing it. Throughout history, the people of God have struggled to see God's vision, and yet they showed up. They waited, as Habakkuk did, on the watchpost, or as Zacchaeus did in the tree, looking and waiting. This is a challenge for us. We're not good at it. And we also wonder, what are we waiting for? We might remember the wonderful play by Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot, which poses this question powerfully and sometimes depressingly. It's a work of existential literature, and that was, of course, a philosophy that said we may never find ultimate truth or total meaning in life. We may not find that kind of answer, but we do live with the consequences of our actions. So make your life good and reap a better future. In this play, these two characters really speak in this way, that perhaps what they think they're waiting for may never come. They don't know. At one point, Vladimir and Estragon are waiting, and Vladimir says to himself, "Was I sleeping while the others suffered? And am I sleeping now? Tomorrow, when I wake, or think I do, what shall I say of today? That with Estragon, my friend, at this place until the fall of night, I waited for Godot?" Vladimir is posing this question: am I waiting only to wait some more? Does my waiting only lead to more waiting? We think of the historical circumstances that may have set up a play like this. We know that it was written in the late 1940s, right after World War II. It's no wonder that many people in the world may have been wondering, what meaning can there be in this world if this could have just happened? Holocaust, genocide, a worldwide war, millions killed. Of course, they were wondering, what meaning could there be? Perhaps we're not waiting for anything, Samuel Beckett poses in this haunting play, and yet beautiful play. We're invited as Christians to wait as well, but to believe that God will do a new thing. That we may need to wait longer than we wanted to, but God will bring God's kingdom at some point in time. I was inspired this past week by a seminar that I attended about the church and hopeful signs that the church can be renewed, but in ways that we may not expect. Reverend Dr. Eric Law is an Episcopal priest who works with churches to renew their ministries so that they may become missional churches and more active in the communities that they serve. I'd like to share with you the title of his book. First of all, it's called Holy Currencies. And this priest, Eric Law, spoke to us about how, yes, finances are one currency in the church, but there are other currencies that we need to bear in mind. He introduced to us a concept called asset-based ministries. He actually referred to the Zacchaeus story. He said, you should get up in the tree and get a broader perspective of who you are. Get a wider lens. See more of who you are and more of what your community needs and how those things can be assets to your relationship with one another. He doesn't ask us to dream lofty dreams and guess wildly at what the church's mission should be, but to get to know our neighbors and to get to know ourselves and see the realistic ways in which our deepest gifts meet the deepest needs of the community that surrounds us. I'll share with you one other image. This is the next slide shares these different currencies. And of course, there's currency of money in purple, but next to it is currency of time and place, then currency of gracious leadership, currency of relationship, currency of truth. Are we honest with ourselves about who we are and who our neighbors are? Currency of wellness. Are we healthy enough to go about this work in the first place? This is a cycle of blessings. And the first thing that Professor Law taught us is that for any of this to work, we have to, on the one hand, be truthful. We also have to keep these currencies flowing. We have to be giving and receiving. We can't keep these things to ourselves. If we bury our talents or our money, it is wasted. If we bury any of these blessings, they are wasted. it's important to keep them moving and to develop some of the strengths into even greater strengths. It's a wonderful concept. He asked us to take that broader view. He also shared with us about a church that very much reminded me of our church. He said that there's a Presbyterian church in San Bernardino that decided it wasn't finished serving the community yet, even though they'd been declining for many years. This church felt a calling to serve the high school that was right next door to them. This high school was struggling greatly. It had about a 27% graduation rate. This church also had received about $100,000 in a bequest that they were offering for this work, to hire Dr. Law as a consultant and to help them to minister to the school. They had already done that much discernment that they wanted to serve the school. They just needed to know how. It turned out they were rather well equipped to do so. They had many teachers among their church members. Some of them weren't eager to go back to a school campus, but they could be convinced to do so, and they had great knowledge of how schools worked and how students thought. They went to the school and said, "How can we help?" And the administration said, "Well, the 10th graders often need supervision because their teachers have a prep period, and if the teachers could come together and prepare, and you could supervise the young people, those sophomores, during that hour, and give them some kind of refreshments and activities, then the teachers could be better prepared for their day." And the church members gladly volunteered to do that. They made coffee cake, and it became the most famous coffee cake in the community, and kids were eager to get into that hour, to be in that activity. It was called a life skills circle, skills with a Z at the end, life skills groups. And those groups met every week, and church members volunteered every week and forged relationships with those young people. Remarkably, over half of those young people in that group, a group of about 15 kids, as I recall, went to either junior college or college after this. They also showed up in the church at some points just to thank the church members and to present some of their progress, even though the church had said this is not about evangelization or bringing Jesus to the school or something that might be controversial. No, they just went as servants, and the fruit was born out of relationships. Eric Law had invited that church to develop its currency of relationship with its next-door neighbors whom they barely had known before. And great fruit was born of this, and it went on and on. The next year, the school said, "Will you start a new group with the next sophomores? And by the way, could you take a group of freshmen as well?" So they have 2 classes going. And now more and more churches around our nation are looking at this life skills model as a potential model for renewal for the church and community. Perhaps this is something that God will call us to seriously and prayerfully consider as well. Amen? This was all possible because some church members were yearning for God to do something new in their midst. They had their eyes open and their hearts and hands ready to do God's work. We're invited to climb up into that tree, to look at all of the assets with which God has blessed us, the currency which God calls us to keep flowing in our church and in our community, so that God may do a new thing, showing up in a new way, casting a vision that all can read and see, so that we may be renewed in our hearts and our lives. May it be so. Amen.